So this discontinued health and beauty product by VENDOO sold for $45. We're starting with with what sold in our reselling shops from the week of December 4th through the 10th, which was just last week. So I am officially caught up on my what sold videos. If you didn't know, discontinued health and beauty can be fairly profitable. As you can see, this one was from 2012, and it's a tinted moisturizer. I paid, I think, about $4 at the thrift store. I did scan it. I think I had heard about it from another reseller. It kind of sounded familiar, so I just did a quick search for it. There was just a little bit of storage wear to the box. The container itself looked clean and unused, and so I went ahead and listed it, and it sold fairly quickly for $45. So this is on eBay. We're going to move over to the next eBay sale that we had is a vintage LL Bean rugby styled shirt. So it wasn't full on rugby style, didn't have kind of that quilted, section to like the shoulders or the elbows or whatever, but it did have that style with the placket collar, or like the hidden placket. And it was LL Bean, like I said, made in the USA, and it had a vintage tag on it. So somebody paid $30 for that shirt. It's got some nice colors. I like that. And I don't remember where we got it. Sorry. I'm thinking, well, it was a thrift store. That's all I know. Next up is a mug. This kind of goes along the lines with the with hats, when I talk about hats and how we end up just picking up Alaska themed hats, and like they seem to do pretty well. So same thing, coffee mugs. This didn't take that long to sell. It was a souvenir. It was a studio pottery style mug, and it just, the decoration on it was like a gold mining company certificate. So just kind of interesting, and that sold for $17. We took sent an offer on that, which somebody took us up on. And Black & Decker. I think I showed this in one of my what sold videos, but then we realized, Mr. Pish Posh reminded me that it hadn't gotten paid for. And so this time it did get paid for. $19 for this travel iron. This has been banging around. I don't remember if this came from the bins or something like that, but it was new. And so we sold it for $19. Now, and speaking of discontinued, so Crabtree and Evelyn, I had this memory of a couple of years ago, it being kind of on like BOLO lists of people who did a lot of health and beauty. And I was like, did they go out of business? Is that what it is that happened? Is that what I remember hearing? But so I Googled the company, and a website came up, and I said, oh, well, they're still in business. So like, what is it that, sometimes businesses threaten to go out of business, companies. And so people are like, they want to buy stuff, and then the company gets rescued or they restructure or something like that. So I wasn't sure if that was the deal, but I looked up, I had found 3 soaps one day at the thrift store for about 50 cents, 25 cents a piece. And so I checked them, and one of them I have listed for like $30, $35, I think, a little bit more. And that, in line with comps. And so I was like, okay, so people are still looking for Crabtree. So is it just a matter of like some scent or something that's discontinued? But then I read like the history of the company, and it did go out of business. Maybe I'm not remembering that right. But anyway, they did have issues. They opened again like in 2019 or something like that with online only. So you can't get it in the stores like you used to be able to get it. So I think that's why there's still a demand online. And then obviously if there's certain things that people can't get anymore. But this was a bar soap, and this one wasn't even like I thought the other one would go first, like it was harder to find. There were several of these available, but we sold ours for $16, which I'm glad it's not, hanging around forever. I've talked about this brand stainless not long ago in one of my videos, my what sold videos, because I had sold the spoons. I had like 5 or 6 spoons, and they looked very similar to this pie server. The handle shapes were very, very similar. But as I did my research, I found out they were 2 different patterns. So the maker is C. Hugo Pot. I can click on that so you can see it. And it's German stainless. And these were just in the baggy wall at Goodwill. And I just like the very mid-century looking design, the kind of the minimalist design to it. So like I said, when I was looking at the baggie, I thought it all went together, kind of like a little dessert set or something. And I could see the name through the bag. So I looked it up and I saw some good prices for that name. Hadn't sold it before. So like I said, the spoon sold for, I don't know, like $80 or $90 or something. And then this pie server sold for $50. So anytime I can get $50 for a single piece of stainless, I am thrilled. Okay, next up is just this little pouch, whatever, Stuart Weitzman. Nothing exciting. It sold for $10. I think this was just at the bins as well. It just was in nice condition. And I don't know. I probably wouldn't pick up something like that again. Now, the North Face. So this was a vintage puffer jacket like a snow jacket. This was a jacket that we got we got some questions from the prospective buyer about like the rating, like what's the temperature rating kind of thing on it, and were there any condition issues? And I was like, oh no, I was like, how do you answer stuff like that? Well, my husband said that the questions came in here. I'll pop it on the label. You can see the vintage look to it. The questions came in, but then they went ahead and bought it before we even had a chance to answer anything. And so we kind of had a bad feeling about it because we were like, oh, they didn't even wait for the answers. So a day, after like we shipped it, or we were about to ship it, and my Mr. Pish Posh was like, should we answer? And I was like, yeah, just tell him, that, because I think he was asked about condition, and we had that in the listing, but it's not always easy to find the description on some eBay listings. And so I'm like, just answer it as best you can. It's a vintage coat. It's not going to have any kind of rating for how cold this should be. And then I looked at the buyer, and they were in Florida, and I was like, okay, well, they're just buying it probably for a trip that they're going to be taking. So hopefully this works for them. Well, fortunately, we got really good feedback from the buyer, and they said that it was exactly as described. And so we felt better about that. I made sure. I don't always tell Mr. Pish Posh about our feedback. He doesn't really pay attention to it. And so I just told him, I said, don't worry, that one is all good. We got good feedback. So that worked out well. That one took a while to sell. That was a while, actually. So I don't know if that's just the look of it, or if, vintage North Face is something maybe not to get excited about. I don't know. Okay, so hats. Now there are quite a few hats in my what sold this week. So I know recently I said something about, how our hat sales had slowed down. So never mind what I said about that. They're still selling. So $16.99 for this very basic. I got this at Goodwill, I'm pretty sure. It was Salt Life, good times, salty vibes. I knew the brand Salt Life can be fairly decent. I don't know. Nothing like major to write home about. But I had picked this up one time early in our hat buying and selling adventures. So I'm glad it sold for $16.99. I never would have expected it to sell this time of year, but it did. Then we had a nice Harris tweed sale. I think I had told you before about the green one came back to us. So we have that relisted. This one we picked up in our thrifting adventure. This is the one, wasn't this the one I had in, yeah, not the most recent one, but another haul video, I think. But anyway, I just remember talking about Harris Tweed, but I could be remembering the wrong jacket. But this was very nice. This one sold for $90, and this one did not have a size. And so I think we just based this one off of the fact that, like, what size my husband is for jackets, and then the fact that it fit him, but the sleeves were a little bit too short. So we just kind of, threw a number out there, and we haven't, I think it's been delivered. Haven't heard anything yet, but $90 for Harris Tweed. So definitely, if you see the tweed or wool type blazers, take a look inside. Look for that little Harris Tweed label. I've talked about it a few times lately, but here's the label again if you need to see that. Then we're moving along to another blazer. This was a woman's blazer by Theory. I will go to the label. So Theory, I've talked about it before on the channel. It's hit or miss for me. I think everything I've had has sold eventually. So I think it's just not super fast. This got a lot of interest pretty quickly, but nobody kind of, nobody pulled the trigger on it until just now. This one actually just sold for $50. It was an equestrian style jacket, and I found the name of it and everything. It was a little bit of a smaller size, but it was in good shape. And so when I got the $50 offer, I was totally fine with that. Now this hat, I know I showed you in a haul video that Mr. Pish Posh and I did together. And this one was R.L. Winston Rod Company, so fly fishing. And it's a local Montana company. So I don't know, how big it is or how likely you guys would find this particular company, but definitely, if you come across fly fishing company type gear, take a look at that. So this hat sold pretty quickly for $26.99. And I think this was the one that maybe was in the better shape. But we showed you a sweatshirt and 2 hats that day, I think. And both the hats have sold, so you'll see the other one in a few minutes. And then I went to the thrift store and found a third one that either got put out later or we missed it the first day. So I found a black one, and so I think we've got that one listed too. So I'm sure that'll go quickly. This is something to keep in mind and to keep your eye out for, is Culver glassware. The pattern is called Cranberry Scroll. So there are a few different patterns of Culver that will sell a lot better and will sell, for higher. We got $90, the full asking price for these 7. It wasn't a full set. We debated on splitting it up, but we were kind of in a let's just list it, see if someone will buy it, and move it fairly quickly. Okay, so if you know other Culver, my mind is totally blank right now, but there's another, Valencia, I think, is one of the popular ones. So there's a few popular patterns by Culver that sell even higher than this, but $90, we were happy with that, and we could move them quickly. Kind of funny, when we found these at a thrift store, it wasn't in our town. It was just a little, a town a little further away. We were doing a little road trip kind of thing. And so it's a thrift store for animal rescue. And we had gone in, and, my husband, Mr. Pish Posh, is pretty thorough at thrift stores. He will look at and dig and look at everything. And so he found this bin kind of under a circular rack of clothing. And on the side, there was a piece of paper that said, the dollar box or something like that. And we're like, okay, that's interesting. Well, we find these glasses in this thing. And so we're like, okay, that's like $7, but they weren't tagged, right? So we go up to we're checking out, we go up to the counter, and, you know, we explain about the dollar box, and they're looking at us like, we don't even know what you're talking about. Well, it's such a tiny, it's like a little place, and they pile up stuff that hasn't been processed yet, kind of in this one corner. And that bin was actually stuff that they were still going to price. And the sign on they didn't even see the sign on the side of the box. It was probably like from a yard sale or something. And so they were like, no, we don't have these priced, so we're going to have to ask the girl who does the pricing how much we're going to charge. So just remember, we were going to pay $7. We had it in our mind. If they were $1 a piece, we'd be paying $7. And so they go get the pricing girl, and she comes over and she looks at him and she's like, oh, I don't know, $3. So the guy at the register was like laughing because he's like, oh man, you like made out better than if we had just given you the $1 a piece price. So funny. It's always an adventure when you're thrifting. This was a cross stitch kit, nothing super exciting. I took an offer for $8 to move it along. Candemar designs. Cross stitch kits can be super profitable, but not every single one. So just keep that in mind. Found this at the toy section one day, some Transformers, which is, it kind of cracked me up that this was the first one that sold, and it sold for the full $25. I paid $3 at the thrift store. There was a few Transformer type style toys there, and I took a picture and sent it to Mr. Pish Posh and said, do you want these? He's like, sure. And this was the cheapest looking one, like the most basic kind of looking one. And it's the one that sold first. So $25 for that. Next up was this mug from Starbucks for the Philippines, sold for $25. I found this one and another Starbucks mug. I found them together, and the other one is like a town in the Philippines. So they kind of go together. But now I'm thinking something real quick. Hold on. Okay. I don't know. Philippines looked spelled wrong for a second. And I was like, did I spell it wrong after all that? But no, I spelled it right. So, anyway, I really thought the other one was a little bit more rare, and I thought it would sell first. But just this basic Philippines one sold for $24.99. Guy Harvey, another baseball hat. Aftco is a fishing company, fishing clothing, and I've sold like some like a vest, some pants, shorts maybe. So I haven't found it in a long time, but this one was kind of a cross branding with Guy Harvey, and so I thought, oh, let's just try it. And so it sold for $18.99, the full asking price. Adele. Okay, so this is a vintage sweater. This sold for $20. I just went ahead and took a $20 offer that we got. It was totally fine with me. Now, I have sold an Adele sweater before, but what you have to remember, what's going to be valuable, look at these Adele. Okay, made in the USA. This is total 80s, 90s type thing. You could tell by the geometric pastels and everything. But if you find Adele vintage sweaters that have cats on them, that's big money. So I think the last one I had was a cat one, and it sold for, all right, big money. It sold for like $40 or $50 or something like that. But that's just a nice price for a vintage little sweater like this. Now this one, I at first was like, oh, should I bother listing it or not? But I did see a comp for a similar geometric one, and it sold. So I went ahead and listed it and got $20 for that. Then we sold these knives. These were really cool. They were stag antler handle. And if you look at the blade had like a design on the blade. Isn't that really cool? Okay, so I got these at the bins. It was in, they were putting, you know, they'll roll a little cart of new goods out and then people can kind of dig through it and then they'll put it away. And so that was the case then. And there was a box of just kind of vintage stuff from a yard sale left over. And I saw these knives and I said, hey, why not? Let's try it. So we only sold them, we didn't sell them for $60. Sometimes when things are not super common, Mr. Pish Posh likes to put like a really high price and then see what happens. Now, someone else, I think the only other listing we found, someone else had them with the carving knife too, but they were asking like 200 something. And so he thought, you know, if I just do the knives like 10 bucks a piece, $60, that's not really that, you know, crazy. And so he decided to try that. Well, you know, people have to know that they want to look for it. And I have had a little bit of trouble with some of this kind of rustic flatware lately. So we sent an offer to somebody and they came back and offered us $30. And, you know, our first instinct is like, no, these are so cool. This is going to be worth more. And then we're like, you know what? Just take it. Just take the money. I paid like nothing. Take the $30, make somebody's day. We move on to other things that we have to list and sell. That's our policy lately anyway. Here's the other R.L. Winston Rod Company hat, and that one also sold for $26.99. And then one more hat. I told you I sold hats this week. This one sold for $12.50. So nothing too exciting on that. But again, a bins find. Moving over to Poshmark, we sold another hat. And this one sold for $40. It was, we had two of these and have sold both of them now. It's just like a local sawmill. This is a vintage hat from the 80s, a local sawmill in Montana. But it was a vintage like denim hat. Denim and corduroy seemed to do pretty well for us. And then it had the big patch, which is one of the things we've talked about in our hat videos for vintage, like trucker style hats, is the patches do a lot better than the embroidered ones. So $40 for that one. And then a different kind of hat, but a beanie that we picked up at the bins. It was the Atlanta Falcons. That sold for $15. And then Arc'teryx, one of our favorite men's brands, or brands in general, to pick up. This was just a very basic base layer. I picked this up at Goodwill, and it was, I think, a day when men's clothing was half off. I had a coupon, and it was just, you know, nothing special to it, just a base layer. And we sold that for $30. And a scarf. This is a woolen cashmere blend scarf. I can't really say, okay, John Hanley, that's a Bolo brand to look out for. I picked it up at the bins because it said with cashmere and had a nice, you know what, this might not even have been at the bins. I think it was my other little thrift store, but I paid like $1 for it. And it's made in Ireland, so we just kind of took a chance on it and sold that one for $22. Peruvian Connection. Now that can be a good brand. I have not found it very often. I believe a lot of Peruvian Connection would be made from alpaca. This was just like a cotton blend, like a knit stretch dress. It was an extra small. Took a long time to sell. Now what was interesting is it sold for $25, which is fine. It was a crazy long skirt. Like, my first one was a collage because I wanted to show what the print looked like, but it was a big maxi. And so I got a message from the buyer who said that it wasn't as long as the description said, and that it must have shrunk like after I wrote the description. So because it's Poshmark, I replied as if I was talking to Poshmark, not to the customer. And I just said, you know, Poshmark has been allowing returns lately. But you know, whether this didn't fit them or they just didn't like it, they don't allow returns for fit generally, although they've gotten a lot more lax about that lately. So sometimes it kind of prompts buyers to come up with other reasons why they want to return it. So I just replied and I said, you know, there's no way this would have shrunk in the mail. You know, I didn't even address the fact that, like, what would I have done to it? You know, I think my computer just looked different. I was like, am I still recording? And then I just said, you know, the buyer's welcome to return it if they want to. But I wanted to be clear that I wasn't accepting responsibility, that possibly the buyer was even measuring it from a different place than I measured it, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're just going to see what happens. I escalated it to Poshmark support. I don't think I've heard anything yet back about it. And I didn't get any other answer back from, you know, the buyer. There's no more conversation about it. So, you know, if they didn't like ask to return it, they just made this comment, but I can't do anything I can't issue a refund. I can't do anything like that. It's all up to Poshmark to do that, which makes things a little simpler. This LL Bean shirt we have had a very long time. We will not just pick up basic LL Bean shirts anymore. $16, finally sold. Then we sold another vintage hat. This was a nice looking made in Korea, like 80s hat for BMW, but it was corduroy, like I mentioned before. Does pretty well, and that sold for $30. Again, from the bins. And another corduroy sold, I think these both sold the same day. $25, this Alaska Airlines. It was a K Products hat made in the USA. And that sold for $25, like I said. And then this was probably our most profitable sale of the week. It was a piece of artwork that, guess where we got it? We got it at the bins. But this this was the little clearance center. Mr. Pish Posh brought this home a few months back. Actually, it was probably like spring, summer. And found the artist, Joel Zaretsky, and it's entitled Shalom, and so that's an artistic way of writing out Shalom in Hebrew. And we had that listed, eBay, Poshmark. We, you know, threw a pretty good price on it. There are other examples. There's other things by this artist that have sold on eBay. So we had, you know, some comps. But we put $124 on it, and it sold on Poshmark for our full asking price. So I thought that was pretty good. And another hat. This one was not vintage, but it's a kind of a nice looking, colorful type hat for the Denver Nuggets basketball. Sold a pattern. We're moving over to Etsy. I sold this cute little 1940s girls sundress sewing pattern. It's a mail order type pattern, so it's neat. It still had its original little envelope, glassine type envelope that helps date it, but they were just mail order and kind of folded up in this style. And little girl's dress and bonnet. That's kind of what a mail order pattern looks like. And there's the little pieces. They're not printed. It's called unprinted because of the time period. It was before they printed any words or instructions or marks on the pattern itself. It would just have like little notches or sometimes perforations to let you know what piece that it was. So that sold for $20. Then over in the Metal and Tweed shop, we have this calculator by Casio that sold for $24. And I miss those buttons. Don't you miss those buttons? I had a calculator like this back in the day. And a couple more mugs. So these are nice, just vintage, no name, no, no markings or anything like that, but very cool, stylized type flowers on that. And then over in the flatware shop, check this out. One fork sold for $34. I love that. Dansk, always a good flatware. I will pick up Dansk flatware. Pretty much no brainer. But some patterns are better than others. So this was one of them. And the pattern was called Thistle. So dinner forks are generally fairly good value of the different flatware pieces. So I have other flatware videos if you want to know anything more about flatware. Then the flatware shop, I keep telling you I'm going to be like not having the flatware shop anymore, but if things are still selling out of it and I'm not doing any work, I'll take whatever sales I can get out of it before I end up, being done with it. But so I have a variation listing of this Interpure flatware, and you would just, pick things from the drop-down menu. So I had 2 sales from this listing this week, and that usually happens. Once you get one sale from it, it bumps you in search results, and so then I tend to have another sale. So the first lady bought, it was 5 or 6, I think, 6 salad forks at $8 a piece. So she paid $48 for 6 salad forks. And then the next person bought 1 knife. I think that was maybe $5, and like 3 salad forks, which were $5 each. Or maybe they were $8 each. I don't remember. I'm trying to think if I'm salad fork 8. So I had salad forks from Korea and some from Japan. Now this pattern can get made in both places. Sometimes people like to match up the flatware that they have. If theirs is marked Korea, they want the ones that are marked Korea. It just means they're made from like the same time period. And so they'll end up, over the years, there can be just slight differences in the weight of something or whatever. And they just want things to match up. So the first lady, she wanted the Korea salad forks. The second lady wanted some of the Japan pieces. So anyway, that's the story there. Then going over to Ruby Lane, we are still talking, this last week there was still the sale. Am I right? Yeah. I think the sale went until like Tuesday of that week. Okay. And so the sale was the Ruby Red Tag sale, 50% off. I had just put a bunch of stuff to try to just move some older inventory. So one person bought these earrings for $6, but then they also bought this casserole spoon for $5. So that's fine. Just, stuff I can get moved out. And then I had this one sold for $8. It's a teacup, believe it or not, and it doesn't have a handle. But I didn't have a saucer or anything like that. So I threw it in the sale and it sold for $8 plus shipping. But then I had this nice sale after the sale ended of these salt and pepper shakers. The company is Bennington Potters, and the pattern is called Blue Agate. And it's a Vermont pottery company, and it's a good company to know for dinnerware. Bennington Potters. So anyway, those were my sales for the week. As usual, please leave a comment down below. Your best sale, how sales, are they still trucking along for this month? How are things going? So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you later on this week.